Hi guys, welcome to the channel. This is my channel about homebrewing. Today it's a beautiful day, the sun is still up. I'm in a shady spot now in my garden. It's not a cloud as far as the eye can see. So what could be better than doing a grain to glass video of the low ABV Hoppy Beer, which David decided that I should make him in the 1K subs video competition. So we're gonna pour a sample of the beer, go through the brew day, recipe wise, and of course sample the beer and get my verdict of it. And of course I will share my thoughts about the theme of brewing a lower ABV beer. Okay, move into the sun so we can have a little bit better lighting on the beer. So here's the beer. It's a little bit darker on camera as usual. Really hope the sun would work better, but hey, you have to trust my words for it. Before we give it a sniff and taste, let's have a look at the brew footage. Okay, that was the brew day and some footage from the fermentation as well. So let's have a look at the beer. We have a white, not so tight head. It's a beautiful, like lemony color to it. As I said earlier, it's not as dark orange as you see it on camera. It's hazy. It has cleared up a bit. It has been in the keg for a few weeks now, but it was much more hazy. No findings were used in this brew. So, as I said, a white head, loose head, not sticking on but leaving a small head. Should I talk a little bit more about the competition and the rules maybe of the competition? So I had this competition when I hit 1,000 subs on the channel. To enter, all you had to do was to put a comment down below to that video and say what you wanted me to brew, and I would brew it for you and send you a bottle of beer and one of these DrHans Brewery engraved glasses. David from Cheshire Brewery won, and he wanted a low ABV Hoppy Beer in about 2 to 3%. I asked him if it was okay for me to do a 3.5%, and the reason for that is 3.5 is actually the Swedish rules for low ABV beer, which can be purchased in the supermarket. All above has to be purchased in a special store which is run by the government and called Systembolaget. That's why I thought I would want to try a 3.5% beer, and David said that it was okay. My initial thought was two plans which I have experimented with. One was to use maltodextrin to bump up the body a bit, and the other was to use a yeast with lower attenuation. I have been experimented with these two methods and I found them to work great as well. So if you want to do lower ABV beer, you can just pick a yeast of your choice, a yeast with a normal attenuation like the USO5 or something like that, or whatever you want, and add like a kilo of maltodextrin to it. Or you could do it the other way, which I actually prefer. You can add more malt in that way, and you just use a yeast that doesn't consume all of the sugar, so a yeast that doesn't attenuate as much. I will come back with some suggestions yeast-wise, but back to the beer. We'll discuss it further, which method I did in this beer. I actually brewed a couple of brews experimenting, but I really thought that David had waited long enough, so I've sent him a bottle. I'm a little bit afraid of how it will manage the transfer over to the UK, because hoppy beers are a bit sensitive. I'm gonna end the ramble there, taste the beer, we can discuss it further. You can smell the hops. Like a soda. It has a fruity scent, you know, like I said, like a soda. Hoppy. Some pineapple and mango. Okay, let's dive in. Cheers, guys. Cheers, David. I really hope the beer is drinkable after the transfer over to UK. So it's quite light beer. And you do get that tropical fruit, but as on the aroma, it's a little bit more like a soda than a beer. The yeast has kicked off some like sour notes, not like it's a sour beer, but a little sourness like you get from a soda, like a Fanta or something like that. It was more hoppy to start with. It has died down a bit, both in aroma and flavor, from sitting in the keg for a few weeks. It has a slight hint of soap, maybe not soap, soapy, perfumey, just a slight hint, which wasn't there to start with, which has developed in the keg, but it's still a nice drop. A very refreshing brew for a hot evening like this. So let's go through the recipe. So in this beer I used, and this is for like a 23-liter batch, 5-gallon batch. I used 3 kilos of pale malt, 300 grams of wheat malt, 150 grams of dextrin malt, 1 kilo of maltodextrin in the boil. No hops were added in the boil. First hop addition, 30 grams of mosaic at flame out, and I let that stand for 20 minutes hot. Then I added 100 grams of Citra and kept the whirlpool going for 40 minutes more. So it was totally an hour of whirlpooling, 130 grams of hops. I fermented this with the WP644, which is an amazing yeast which can tolerate a lot of heat. So I used my new heat method, which you have to try out. You really don't need a fermentation fridge, or at least maybe not a second fermentation fridge, if you're using my method. I will put a link to the method down below. Check that video out. I was planning to buy a second fermentation fridge, but I don't know now, because this method had worked so great. And this summer I have 5 quake strains to experiment with, and there's also so many heat tolerant yeast that can be used. But check out that video. But back to the beer. So it was fermented with a WP644 and quite hot, so it went quite fast. And don't know, it was on day 2 or 3 maybe. I dry hopped it with 170 grams of hops. That was 100 grams of Citra and 70 grams of mosaic. And then it was fermented out. I think the beer was fermented in like 4 days or something like that. At this hot temperature, everything goes extremely fast. I did adjust the pH of the mash. I mashed it at 69 Celsius at 60 minutes. I did a mash out at 75, 76 for 10 minutes. I did use some calcium sulfate to my water. I'm experimenting with that, but that's for my water, so pay no attention to that. The OG was 1053 and the FG was 1026. So by adding the maltodextrin, you are introducing sugars that normal yeast can't handle. So that's a way to do it. It doesn't mean it's gonna be sweet. It just gives it a little better body. But as I said, I had been experimenting with this method and it works, but I think it's more interesting to do it the all grain method and instead use yeast that can't eat all of the sugars. I would suggest trying out the London ESB yeast from Ladermand, or even the Windsor yeast. They are good yeasts to experiment because they will leave a lot of sugars behind. Don't be afraid that just because your beer has a high FG means that it's gonna be sweet. There are different kinds of sugars and all of them aren't sweet. So I think I will wrap this one up here. If you have any comments or questions or whatever, put them down below and I will try to get to them. So cheers guys, and cheers David. Hope you are at least a bit satisfied with your beer and your glass. I'm looking forward to your tasting video. I have been holding this video off because I really wanted you to do your video first, but I have to move things along for the rest of the audience. So cheers guys, and thanks for watching. DrHans out.